There were many generals in World War II, but there were not many who could really command a million-level army, and there were not many who could be called famous generals. If we make a list of them, no matter how we evaluate them, Field Marshal Fedor von Bock of the Third Reich is qualified to be at the top. At the beginning of World War II, he was the commander of the army group. From the Battle of Poland and the Battle of France to the Soviet-German battlefield, he completed the most encirclement and annihilation battles. On the Soviet-German battlefield alone, more than 1 million enemy troops were annihilated and captured. Famous generals such as Manstein, Guderian, and Hoth were all his subordinates. There were almost no shortcomings in military command. Moreover, Bock also had unique insights into the occupation of the German theater. If Hitler had listened to his advice, perhaps the Third Reich could have lasted a little longer. Bock was born in 1880 in Brandenburg in the German Empire, an old Prussian military family. The family's military history dates back to the time of the Knights of Bridgetown in the 12th century. His father was promoted to Major General in the Franco-Prussian War and made a nobleman. His mother was the sister of Falkingham, Chief of Staff of the German Army at the beginning of the First World War, held dual German-Russian titles of nobility. At the age of 8, Bock began his rigorous military education, fluent in Russian, French, and English, loyalty to his king and his country. Dedicating his life to military service was his creed. After becoming a high-ranking general, Bock always mentioned in his speeches to cadets and soldiers under his command, the greatest honor of a German soldier is to die in battle for the fatherland. At the outbreak of World War I, Captain Bock had already spent 2 years on the German general staff. Therefore, at the beginning of the war, he had been working as a staff officer in various units. He was involved in the preparation of battle plans and the coordination of military supplies. At the beginning of 1916, he applied for a command post at the front. He was appointed a battalion commander in the 4th Commando Infantry Regiment. He fought at the battles of the Somme and Cambrai, received a Blue Max. Late in the war, he again moved to the staff. He served in the Crown Prince's Army Group under the command of Crown Prince Wilhelm. He served successively as quartermaster and chief of operations, accumulated a wealth of experience in large corps operations. After the surrender of Germany, Bock remained in the army. 1922, the Weimar government and the Soviet Union. The Treaty of Rapallo is signed. Relations are normalized. Both sides urgently need to reorganize their military forces. A secret partnership was formed. Bock was chosen by the father of the Wehrmacht, General Sackett. He became a member of the Special Art Division. The department was based in the Soviet Union. It trained military personnel for the future expansion of the German army. On the other hand, it cooperated intensively with the Soviet Union in the development of new weapons and tactics. At the same time, a paramilitary organization was secretly developed to circumvent the Treaty of Versailles, the Black Wehrmacht, to protect these secrets to create the illusion of treaty compliance. Bock did a lot of dirty work, like assassinating all informants suspected of working for the Victory Control Commission, perjury in court, denying the Black Defense Force any connection with the Wehrmacht, etc. In 1933, Hitler came to power to reorganize armaments. After continued compromise between Britain and France, he simply tore up the Treaty of Versailles in 1935. A massive expansion of the army was announced. Although Bock disdained many of the Nazis' actions, but the mustache rearmament of Germany is very welcome. At this time, he was already a lieutenant general. In the Wehrmacht, he had a high level of seniority and prestige. He was the number 3 man after von Brauchitsch and von Rundstedt, and he didn't care about politics but only focused on the military. So he was favored by Hitler. Bock was a loner. He didn't get along with his colleagues. The army command tried to get him out of the service several times, but mustache prevented him from continuing with his duties. Bocker's loyalty to Hitler grew from there. During the Second World War, he was asked to lead the officer corps that plotted to assassinate Hitler, but he refused. Not long after the order to expand the army was given, Bock was appointed commander of the 3rd Army Group. He was promoted to General of Infantry. During this period, he did everything in his power to rebuild the German military. Bock had a good relationship with Kesselring, later Air Marshal, and then commander of the 1st Air Force. They worked closely together. They did a lot of training in ground and air operations. In the early stages of World War II, the German army relied on the rapid advance of armored forces and air power. As a traditional guest, Bock initially rejected the new armored tactics proposed by his opponent, Guderian. He felt that advancing too fast would expose his flanks to the enemy. But like his old commander, Rundstedt, Bock was more tolerant of his men. Arguments are arguments. But he didn't use his power to overpower them. He gave them room to maneuver. Later, when he saw the effect of armored blitzkriegs in action, he accepted this new tactic. September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland. World War II breaks out. Bock leads Army Group North with about 630,000 men, attacked Poland from the northern road, sieged the Polish army north of the Wisła River along the way. Under his overall command, all the armies under his command completed the battle plan in the shortest possible time. They meet up with the Soviet Army and the Southern Army Group. Poland died in 5 weeks. Then, on the Western Front, in France, Bock was the commander of Army Group B. He was responsible for breaking into Belgium and Holland to attract the British and French forces to the north. This would allow the main thrust of the attack, Army Group A, to penetrate through the Ardennes forest and into the Atlantic Ocean, to surround and annihilate the enemy. Although he was not happy with his role as second-in-command, but Bock did his job well. On May 10, 1940, when the offensive was launched, he commanded the army in a rapid offensive that forced Holland out of the war in 5 days. Belgium surrendered in 18 days. The British and French armies were held in check, creating an opportunity for Army Group A to break through. Bock then commanded the army to execute the Red Program, southward to close the siege. France, known as the #1 army in Europe, quickly collapsed. After the surrender of France, Bock was promoted to Field Marshal. He suggested that France be rebuilt, settle the refugees, and release most of the prisoners of war to facilitate the occupation. When pushing for the Soviet-German War, he also proposed to Hitler to give the Soviets in the occupied territories land ownership in exchange for their cooperation with Germany, should fight under the banner of liberating the Russians, instead of just destroying and slaughtering. However, none of these suggestions were accepted. If these soft measures had been taken, perhaps the resistance in the German theater would not have been so fierce. The Reich could have held out longer. June 1941, Germany invades the Soviet Union. This time Bock assumes the main offensive, commanding the most powerful German army, Army Group Center, under Guderian and Holt, commanding 2 armored clusters and 2 army groups. The strength of the army is more than 1 million. So many people, not to mention combat. It's not easy to take them on a trip. It's not an easy task. At this time, Bock has fully accepted the concept of armored assault, commanding the army in a pincer attack all the way around. In a month or so, he captured Moscow's gateway, Smolensk, and advanced to the heart of the Soviet Union. It is expected that by the end of August, we will be able to conquer the city. But Hitler gave the order, Bock's Holt Panzer Group, to support Army Group North's attack on Leningrad. Guderian's Panzer Group was to move south to help Army Group South surround Kiev. Bock was strongly opposed to this. He thought the north and south fronts would be fine. Concentrate on Moscow first. The rest will be easy. But Mustache insisted on doing what he wanted. In this way, the Typhoon operation to attack Moscow was delayed for a full month. The Soviet Union utilized this precious time, mobilizing Siberian and Far Eastern armies to strengthen Moscow's defense. The latter's strength exceeds 2.5 million troops. October 1st, Bock launches an offensive against Moscow, the Central Army Group under his command. By this time, it has assembled 56 infantry divisions, 14 armored, and 8 motorized divisions. The strength is 1,920,000 men, but the best time to attack was lost, despite the annihilation of much of the enemy's vital forces. The onset of winter and the resistance of the Soviets, as well as the poor logistics of the Germans, put them in a difficult position. On December 5th, while the Germans were exhausted, the Soviets in Moscow launched a counteroffensive. To avoid further losses, Bock orders a retreat, but was opposed by Mustache. A heated argument ensues. Bock was forced to take a leave of absence on health grounds. Command was taken over by Field Marshal von Kluge, but not for long. In January 1942, Field Marshal von Reiseneiland, commander of Army Group South, died of a heart attack. Bock was reactivated to take his place. On the southern front, he continued to excel. He commanded the armies under Manstein-Holtkreist and other famous generals. At the Second Battle of Kharkov, in the summer offensive and other operations to destroy and capture a large number of Soviet troops. However, he still argued with Hitler about the war effort. Bock was such a man. He was never ambivalent about military matters. You're wrong. I won't listen. The mustache grew increasingly irritated. Finally, in July, shortly after Army Group South captured Fort Sevastopol, relieved of Blog command, the old commander ended his 45-year military career. Hitler said privately with people around him, he still appreciates the Blog, but now only need completely obedient commanders. After this, Bock was practically under house arrest, to avoid him being seen walking around. Senior general's idol, affecting the mood of the population at home. At the end of April 1945, as the Reich was about to fall, Bock received a telegram from his old subordinate, Manstein, asking him to join him in Hamburg, Hitler-named successor, the new government under Field Marshal Donitz. On May 3rd, the Bock family is strafed by Allied planes on the road. Wife, daughter, and others are killed instantly. Bock is hospitalized with serious wounds. Died early the next morning. Was the only Third Reich Field Marshal to be killed by the Allies. 4 days later, Germany surrendered unconditionally. The Prussian militarism that accompanied Bock's life also died out.